It was the moment I learned what true silence meant. Floating in the void, the only sound my own ragged breathing inside a cracked helmet, I watched the glory of Terra, my proud flagship, break apart in flames. Seconds stretched into lifetimes as silent gouts of fire erupted from her hull, oxygen and lives alike consumed in the cold maw of space. In that hush, I could almost hear my heart pounding, or perhaps it was the distant echo of the ship's dying reactors. Either way, it was the sound of everything ending. How had it come to this? One moment I was Lord Captain Cassius Blackthorne, rogue trader of the Imperium, master of a ship and a legacy stretching back centuries. The next, I was just another drifting soul in the void, bereft of title, crew, and warrant. Yes, the famed Warrant of Trade, that sacred parchment signed by the High Lords themselves, the very license to roam the stars with the Emperor's blessing. To die here, alone and forgotten, would have been a fitting end to my tale, I mused bitterly. A rogue trader's death in the cold beyond, unwitnessed by any save the distant stars. Many have met such a fate in the vast expanse where the Emperor's light fades. Perhaps I deserved no better. But fate, or the Emperor's twisted sense of humor, wasn't done with me just yet, because as I floated amidst the debris, adrenaline and fear wrestling with shock, one thought crystallized in my mind, cutting through the despair like a knife. I will not end here. The vow formed silently behind clenched teeth. Maybe it was pride, that stubborn hallmark of House Blackthorne. Maybe it was rage at the betrayal, still fresh and raw, keeping me warm where the void's chill should have claimed me. Or maybe it was simple fear of oblivion. Whatever it was, it ignited something in my chest, as surely as promethium on dry tinder. I wasn't dead yet, and so long as I lived, the story wasn't over. House Blackthorne had not fallen here. Vengeance, the concept, not just the ship, would be mine. A faint crackle in my helmet vox snapped me back to the present. Through the blood seeping into one eye and the fog of my reeling brain, I registered a voice. Tinny, urgent, familiar. "Lord Captain, Cassius, do you copy?" By terror, I could have wept at the sound. It was the Navigator's aide, or perhaps the Vengeance's pilot. I couldn't be sure. The Vengeance. Emperor bless that stalwart little ship. Through luck or providence, my escort frigate had survived the carnage and was now combing the wreckage for survivors. For me. "I'm here," I gasped, my voice rasping in my ears. "Alive!" Relief flooded the crackling vox link. "Hang on, we have your signal, bringing you in." I craned my neck, every movement a jolt of pain, and in the distance saw the Vengeance's running lights cutting through the debris field. In my eyes, that stalwart frigate shone brighter than any star, a lone ray of hope in a sea of death. I closed my eyes briefly, uttering a silent prayer to the God Emperor, and perhaps to any lesser deity inclined to listen to a desperate fool. Not today. Not like this. As I waited for rescue, suspended amid the drifting remains of my once great ship, I felt a swell of grim resolve. I was battered, half-blind with blood and grief, but alive. And so long as I lived, the story wasn't over. In the silence of the void, I made a new promise. If traitors thought they could snuff out Cassius Blackthorne so easily, they were about to learn their error. What happens when a rogue traitor loses his warrant? I intended to show them. I should start at the beginning of this nightmare, at least the point where normal ended and the slow spiral into hell began. It was only a standard day ago, aboard the bridge of the glory of Terra, though it feels like a lifetime has passed since I strode those familiar decks as their master. The ship was alive with the quiet hum of activity that morning. If it was morning, aboard a void ship, time follows its own rules. I remember the glow of hololithic screens washing over the crew pits, the incense hanging in the air from the dawn's devotional, the distant clang of machinery echoing through the hull. It was all routine, all comfortingly mundane in our extraordinary life out beyond the Emperor's light. As a rogue trader, routine is a relative term. One day might find us charting a new warp route to a forgotten star cluster. The next exchanging hails, and sometimes broadsides, with void pirates or negotiating trade terms with the Xenos envoy that would freeze the blood of a Puritan back on Terra. Such is the dual blessing and curse of the Warrant of Trade. Freedom. The freedom to go where others cannot, to behold marvels and horrors in equal measure, to claim riches beyond the wildest dreams of planetary governors, and the freedom to die an ignominious death in uncharted space, far from any hope of salvation or remembrance. My own Warrant of Trade was the heart of House Blackthorn's power and pride, a heavy scroll of crackling vellum, inked with the High Lord's sigils, sanctified by a score of Primarch's seals, or so the family legend claimed. In truth, our charter dated to the Angevin Crusade, when my illustrious ancestor swore his fleet and fortune to help bring a swath of lawless worlds into the Imperium's fold. For that service, Golgana Angevin himself, the Crusade's Lord Militant, granted the Blackthorns a warrant and the right to rule whatever we could wrest from the void beyond. And rest we did. Worlds, wealth, and renown followed in the centuries after. The document, the warrant, became our lifeblood, passed reverently from parent to child through generations. I received it from my father's dying hands, along with his admonition. Never let it fall from your grasp. By the golden throne I had kept that oath, until mere hours ago. A lump forms in my throat as I recall the weight of the warrant's adamantine case in my palms, the way the gilt aquila on its seal caught the light of our ship's chapel. To think it's now in the hands of scum and heretics, it's enough to make my blood boil anew. But I digress. That day had begun like so many others in our ventures. We were translating out of the warp after a 3-week passage through turbulent currents. Our destination was a lonely star system on the far edge of the Imperium's charts, little more than a whisper in explorator logs. Rumor among voidfarers claimed a derelict from the dark age of technology drifted there, a vast space hulk, packed with forgotten treasures and unholy dangers in equal measure. The Empyrean's Hand, the tales called it. I normally put little stock in voidfolk legends, but this one came with fragmentary coordinates and a corroborating snippet from a magos of the Adeptus Mechanicus, eager to recover lost tech. If there was even a chance of finding archaeotech was worth the risk. Such a prize could secure my dynasty's fortunes for centuries, and if not, at least provide a grand adventure to stave off the doldrums of routine trade. I recall standing on the command dais of the bridge, hands clasped behind my back in what I must have thought was a suitably regal pose. My bridge officers went about their tasks with practiced precision. The great domed ceiling above was dimmed for translation, and I could see the faint ghost image of the warp outside through the armored glass teal viewports, sickly color swirling in impossible patterns. Even after all these years, that sight makes me uneasy if I stare too long. I much prefer real space stars. Translation to real space in 2 minutes, Lord Captain, intoned the Navigator, her voice echoing from within the depths of her gilded control sanctum. Navigator First Class, Olysia Algrim, a distant cousin from a Navigator house tied to my dynasty by long contract. Like all her kind, she possessed the warp eye that guided us through that infernal dimension, and like all her kind, she seldom left her private chamber just off the bridge. I picture her in that moment, tall, willowy, with a porcelain mask covering the upper left of her face to hide the mutation of her third eye. Perhaps she was calm, focused on the delicate task of piercing the veil between realities. Or perhaps she harbored the same apprehension I did. The Empyrean had been restless this voyage, full of whispering currents that slid against our Gellar Field with malign interest. I offered a curt acknowledgement, trying to sound nonchalant. "Very good, Lady Algrim. Bring us out smoothly." Across the command throne from me, Silas Vane, my first officer, busied himself with coordinating the transition. He stood ramrod straight in his navy blue void uniform, the hint of a sneer permanently etched on his sharp features. Silas would claim it was just how his face looked, and in fairness, he sneered even when sharing a good amasec. He had been with me for nearly a decade, through 2 mutinies, small ones hardly worth mentioning, a dozen fierce engagements, and one particularly ugly fever outbreak on a long-haul voyage that had tested the crew's faith. Silas had proven capable in all those trials. More than capable, I'd often praised in front of the crew, enjoying the way it made him stiffen with a mix of pride and discomfort. He wasn't one for open compliments. If someone had told me that morning that Silas Vane would be the architect of my downfall, I would have chuckled and perhaps docked them a week's rations for disrespect. Silas was practically family, or so I believed. I had dined with him, entrusted him with command during my occasional absences planetside, even saved his life on one occasion when an orc boarding party nearly cleaved him in 2. The man I thought I knew was loyal to the bone. If he had any flaw, it was perhaps an overabundance of caution, a certain hesitation to seize opportunities that I, with my adventurer's spirit, as my late father had called it, with a mixture of pride and worry, was eager to grasp. We balanced each other, I liked to think. Emperor knows in this line of work, a captain needs a second who can urge restraint when needed. That morning, Silas offered one of his customary cautious advisements. "Void scans upon reversion indicate some debris in system," he reported, eyes narrowing as he read off green-lit runes on a sensorium panel. "Possible asteroid fragments. We should raise shields the moment we're through, sir, just in case." I gave a light shrug, feeling indulgent. "Of course, Mr. Vane, by all means. Let's not have a random rock denting our paint." Perhaps I sounded a touch sardonic. I was in high spirits at the prospect of our destination. Silas simply nodded and relayed the instructions. I remember he glanced at me then, a sidelong look as if weighing something in his mind. I thought nothing of it at the time, likely just checking if I had more orders. Now I wonder if it was hesitation, a flicker of conscience before the plunge. I'll never know. Moments later, translation occurred. If you've never experienced a warp translation, consider yourself blessed. It's like being yanked inside out through a pinhole in reality. Even with the Gellar Field's protection and the Navigator's skill, the human soul recoils from that instant where here and there exchange places. I braced myself on the railing, jaw clamped shut to keep from biting my tongue. The view screens went dark, then exploded with static and light as the immaterium spat us out. Nausea clawed at my gut. A chorus of muffled moans rose from the crew pits as voidmen fought down the usual bout of translation sickness. The air felt electric, charged with the warp's aftertaste. "Translation complete," came Navigator Ogrim's disembodied voice. I could hear the fatigue beneath her professional tone. "We are in real space, coordinates nominal within the Telos system." I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Around me, the bridge crew moved with efficient discipline to their post-translation checklists. Tech priests overseeing the engineerium relayed the machine spirit's status in bursts of Binharek Kant. Ratings recalibrated augurs to the material universe, their deck chief barking at any who moved sluggishly. The smell of ozone and incense filled my nose as our chief chirurgeon went around with medicae attendants, ensuring no one had a heart attack or worse during the jump. All ordinary. All well. I allowed myself a tight smile. "Excellent work, Lady Ogrim," I said toward the Navigator's sanctum. "Take a well-earned respite." Silas cleared his throat quietly, drawing my attention. "Shields are up, Lord Captain. Running a full scan of the system now." I nodded and stepped over to join him at the sensorium station, boots ringing on the polished steel deck. The hololithic projector displayed a hazy image of our immediate surroundings. True to Silas's warning, there was a clutter of returns, likely the debris he'd mentioned. I saw no obvious threats, no energy signatures of hostile ships, which was reassuring given how close to the maw, the warp passage into this region, we still were. Often pirates stalk the fringe jump points, but not today, it seemed. "Begin scan for the target hulk," I ordered, leaning on the edge of the console. Tiny runes flickered as the auger array swept outward. One of the junior officers, Lieutenant Darvis, spoke up from the pit below. "Sir, picking up some unusual readings on the periphery. High metal density clusters consistent with vessel hulls. Could be our hulk. Or could be a flotilla of misidentified rocks," Silas murmured skeptically. Ever the cautious one. "Only one way to find out." I straightened. "Helm, take us in slowly. Plot an approach vector toward those returns. Weapons, keep macrocannons warmed, and lance capacitors on standby, just in case our treasure's already claimed by unsavories." The bridge buzzed with acknowledgement. Through the viewport, I could see the distant glimmer of a pale sun and the silhouette of a lonely planet or two. The glory of Terra advanced, cutting through the void on thrusters, her void shields shimmering faintly as they met the sparse particles of the interplanetary medium. Standing there on my grand bridge, flanked by loyal officers, I felt a swell of anticipation. This could be a momentous find for us. My gloved fingers tapped the railing in a habit I'd picked up from my father. He used to do that when eager or anxious. If only he could see me now, I thought proudly, on the cusp of a discovery that could eclipse even his achievements. Perhaps I was a touch too proud in that moment. Hubris and nemesis are constant companions in the void. The next minutes passed in relative quiet as we closed the distance. I spent them discussing with Magos Ral, my chief engineer, who manifested as a crackling voice over a Vox grill, how to safely latch onto the hulk if we found it, and reviewing boarding team readiness with Security Chief Kolpek. All was going smoothly. Too smoothly, one might say in retrospect. We found the hulk, or rather, it found us. "Contact dead ahead," came a shout. On the hololith, a massive shape coalesced out of the sensor blur, an amalgamation of hulls fused together, drifting near a pale gray planet. Even at extreme range, the thing was enormous, kilometers of twisted metal. Excitement fluttered in my chest. This was it, the Empyrean's hand, if the legends were true. Our prize. But even as I grinned and issued new commands, fate had other plans. Red warning runes suddenly flared across several consoles. A sensor officer's voice cracked with alarm. "Multiple energy spikes detected. High yields. Emperor preserve us. Those are mines." Mines. My mind barely processed the word when the glory of Terra shuddered violently. A burst of light flashed outside the viewport to starboard, then another. Boom, boom, the ship lurched. I was thrown against the railing, ears ringing as klaxons began howling through the bridge. "Helm, full stop," I shouted, scrambling to my feet. "Raise void shields to maximum." "Shields are holding, Captain," Silas reported, voice raised over the din. The lights flickered as our mighty cruiser absorbed the brunt of the detonations. I tasted copper. Had I bitten my tongue after all? It was an ambush of sorts, an unmoving field of proximity mines hidden among the debris, now exploding against us like a swarm of angry fireflies. How in the hell? Those weren't on Auspex, I snarled. The sensor lieutenant's face was pale as he stammered. Apologies, Lord Captain. They must have been stealthed or deactivated until our approach triggered them. Trust nothing in the void, I reminded myself bitterly. Damage report. Minor hull damage on outer plating, sections 12 through 18, came the reply from an engine seer console. Shields absorbed most of it. The Omnissiah's mercy was with us. Clear the rest of those mines. Gentle mind, we don't need more fireworks, I ordered. The Glory's advanced targeting cogitators began pinpointing and last blasting the remaining floating bombs. On the hololith, I watched the blips wink out one by one. My heart was still hammering, but the immediate threat seemed contained. That's when Silas approached me, his expression oddly calm amid the chaos. Captain, we should withdraw and reassess, he said evenly. This could be a trap. If someone laid mines, they might still be in the area. Perhaps pirates waiting for a crippled ship. I shook my head, adrenaline and annoyance getting the better of me. We've come all this way. They failed to cripple us thanks to your precaution with the shields. Now we know to keep eyes open. I won't turn tail at the first scarecrow they toss out. Silas's jaw tightened. As you say. He hesitated, then added quietly. With respect, sir, I advise caution. The crew is rattled. Perhaps a brief holding position to regroup. I decide when we regroup, I snapped, more harshly than intended. We press on, unless you've suddenly lost your nerve, First Officer. For a brief moment, something flashed behind his eyes, something like anger, or was it contempt? But in a blink it was gone, replaced by that mask of professionalism. He bowed his head slightly. Of course, Lord Captain, forgive my overstep. I felt a pang of guilt. Silas was only doing his duty, and likely he was right that caution wouldn't hurt. But I was keen to seize momentum, embarrassed by being caught off guard. The mines could have been ancient for all we knew, remnants from some past attempt to claim the Hulk. I wouldn't let a few rusty bombs deter me now. Still, I coughed and clapped his shoulder, attempting a conciliatory tone. Your counsel is always valued, Silas. Let's continue carefully, as you suggest. He gave a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Aye, sir, carefully. If only I'd read the signs then. The quiet tension in his voice, the way he moved with a newfound stiffness. But I dismissed it. There were more pressing matters. The rest of the approach was nerve-wracking but uneventful. We maneuvered through the minefield's cleared path toward the drifting behemoth that was our target. Closer now, floodlights illuminated the grotesque beauty of the space hulk, a conglomeration of ship carcasses welded together by the warp's insanity. Its silhouette was jagged against the starlight, pieces of it rotating slowly as if beckoning us in. I ordered a halt at several kilometers' distance, not wanting to scrape hulls with that monster until we were ready. Launch reconnaissance drones. Let's get a closer look at what we're dealing with. As tech priests and servitors obeyed, I allowed myself to breathe again. No immediate threats on scanner besides the mines. Perhaps this find was uncontested after all, aside from automated defenses. If so, all the better for us. The plan forming in my mind was straightforward. Map entry points, send boarding teams to secure sections, find the Mechanicus treasure, and haul it out. I'd done similar operations on derelicts, though nothing of this scale. My spirit should have soared with excitement at imminent fortune. Instead, unease crept in. The mine ambush nagged at me. If someone had placed those, where were they now? Why not follow up? Pirates are rarely subtle or patient. Could it have been meant to ward off anyone from exploring this hulk? If so, it implied whoever set them hadn't returned, or something happened. I pushed those thoughts aside as the drone feeds came in, showing grainy visuals of the Hulk's exterior. Twisted metal, an identifiable prow of an Imperial frigate from centuries ago jutting out one side, the broken wing of an ancient transport vessel on another. Many entry wounds and hangar bays yawning open. No lights or power signatures detected within. It was a dead thing, seemingly. One image made me pause. Near the Hulk's core, the drone picked out a structure that didn't match any typical ship design I knew. A cluster of spires and domes, almost like a small space station, had been assimilated. Could that be where the archaeotech lay? It gave me a shiver for reasons I couldn't articulate. As I studied the data, Silas stood a meter behind me, silent. Perhaps he too was absorbing our good fortune, I imagined. The rest of the bridge was bustling with preparation for the next phase. I didn't know it then, but those were the final moments of normalcy I'd ever experience aboard my flagship. In mere minutes, betrayal would erupt and blood would stain those decks I loved. Looking back, I can pinpoint dozens of small warnings I missed. The tension in Silas's posture, the way one of the armsmen at the hatch kept his hand too near his sidearm, the almost imperceptible absence of a few junior officers at their stations. I should have known. Thrown, maybe some part of me did sense the storm on the horizon, but I convinced myself it was only residual nerves from the mine incident, because things were about to go very, very wrong, and I, fool that I was, had no idea. It happened swiftly, and at first I mistook it for just another crisis of the sort a seasoned crew handles in stride. One of the recon drone feeds cut to static, and a junior tech priest was chanting litanies of appeasement to coax it back when a fresh alarm blared. Proximity alerts, multiple contacts. My stomach lurched. Not mines again. Something new. "Unidentified vessel translating in-system," cried Lieutenant Darvis from Augur Control. His voice spiked with panic. "Translation signature on the far side of the Hulk. Emperor, save us! It's almost on top of us!" Before I could respond, the glory of Terra rocked violently. A pillar of fire streaked past the viewport, narrowly missing our prow. Then another. Someone was firing on us. "Battle stations!" I roared, though the bridge crew hardly needed the encouragement. They sprang into action, training taking over even as confusion reigned. On the tactical display, a red contact resolved, a cruiser-sized ship emerging from behind the hulking mass. It bore no transponder signal. Pirates, or worse. A sleek, predatory silhouette, its hull black and spined with harsh angles, slid into view like a void shark emerging from cover. My teeth bared in a snarl. So the Hulk wasn't unclaimed after all. "Void shields double front, return fire," I ordered. My gunnery officer acknowledged, sending the Glory's formidable lance batteries to acquire the target. The ship shuddered again under a grazing hit. Whoever they were, they'd been lurking, perhaps using the Hulk to mask their presence. Cunning. "Silas, damage report on that hit?" I barked, eyes glued to the tactical feed. There was no answer. I tore my gaze away, looking for my first officer. Silas was not at the sensor station anymore. Strange. He was just there moments ago. A bad time for him to step away. Irritation flared, but I pushed it aside. Perhaps he'd gone to coordinate damage control with engineering via direct Vox. One of the ensigns called out, "Direct hit to port batteries, sir. Minor casualties, guns still operational. Return salvo in 3, 2. The Glory's macrocannon broadside unleashed, a thunder one can feel in the deck plates. Through the viewport, I saw bright blossoms of impact flaring against the void as our shells exploded near the enemy ship. A glancing blow, perhaps. The foe began to bank aside now that surprise was lost. "Get me Vox contact with that vessel," I commanded. "Perhaps they'll see reason under the gun." But before the calm officer could comply, the world turned upside down. Without warning, the lights cut out, plunging the bridge into darkness. The steady thrum of power through the deck faltered. Then a series of secondary explosions rang out inside the bridge itself. I heard a whoosh of flame behind me and the screams of crew. The emergency illuminators flickered on, bathing the scene in hellish red. I spun around, ears ringing. One of the cogitator stations was a ruin of sparks and blood. A bomb? My mind struggled to catch up. Sabotage on the bridge. In the strobing red light, I saw shapes moving that did not make sense. Armsmen. My armsmen. Raising weapons at their fellows, firing point blank. A burly sergeant who'd served my house for 20 years crumpled with a last bolt through his skull, shot by one of his own squad mates. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Mutiny. Chaos reigned. Loyal crew dove for cover or grappled with traitors in vicious hand-to-hand fights among sparking consoles. I saw the calm officer slump over her station, throat cut by the blade of a man who'd stood beside her every shift for 5 years. A hot flood of anger and disbelief surged through me. I ducked as a stray gunshot whizzed past my head. The traitors were indiscriminately firing on those still loyal. 2 of my personal guard, startled but quick to act, flanked me now, firing their shot cannons at a cluster of mutineers taking cover near the navigation alcove. I snatched a fallen officer's pistol from the deck. No fancy heirloom weapon, just a standard-issue las pistol, but it fit my hand like an extension of my will. With a snarl, I popped up and squeezed off 2 shots. One traitor staggered as my last bolt caught him in the upper chest, burning through his uniform. He dropped, writhing and screaming. "Captain down!" one of my guards shouted. I jerked aside just as a hail of autogun rounds tore through the air where I'd stood, punching holes in a hololithic display behind me. From the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Silas Vane again. Finally, there he was, emerging from a cloud of smoke at the rear of the bridge, flanked by half a dozen armed men. My heart sank as I recognized those men, members of the ship's security detail, and a junior officer or 2. They moved with chilling purpose, firing disciplined bursts to cover their advance. Silas held a plasma pistol in one hand, its ominous glow illuminating his face in flickers. His other hand gripped a long power sword crackling with energy. "Silas!" I roared over the din, hoping perhaps this was some misunderstanding, some insanity that hadn't touched him. "Secure this madness immediately! That's an order!" He met my eyes across the chaos, and in that moment all hope that he wasn't part of this died. There was no confusion or shock on his features, only cold resolve, a fanatic light burning in his eyes. He raised his plasma pistol and fired without a word. The bolt of superheated energy seared the air. Had I not already been on edge, it would have taken me in the chest. As it was, I twisted instinctively. Agony lanced up my left arm as the plasma grazed it, the heat blistering through my uniform and flesh alike. I bit back a scream, stumbling behind the damaged railing of the command dais for cover. So this was it. My trusted first officer leading a coup in the heat of battle, betrayal upon betrayal. There was no time for shock or heartbreak, only survival and fury. Silas's traitors were fanning out methodically, overpowering remaining loyalists on the bridge. The air stank of ozone, burnt flesh, and spilled blood. I crouched next to one of my guards behind the railing. He was bleeding from a stomach wound, still valiantly trying to reload his shotgun with shaking hands. "Stay down, you bastard," I hissed at Silas, more to myself than anything, as I peeked and snapped a few return shots with the last pistol. I had to move. Pinned here was death. 2 of Silas's goons with auto rifles were advancing on our position, firing suppressive bursts. I tapped the wounded guard's shoulder and signaled towards a side hatch. an access door leading off the bridge toward my private briefing chamber. If we could get through and seal it, we might regroup or escape deeper into the ship. He gave a weak nod, covering fire, a concept drilled into every officer. I popped up again and unloaded the last pistol's power pack at the advancing traitors. One went down, his knee exploding in a red mist as a shot found home. The other faltered, ducking behind a bulkhead column. "Go!" I barked at the guard. He staggered to his feet, using the last of his strength to hobble to the hatch. I was right behind him. A las round sizzled past my ear. Another punched into the guard's back with a sickening burn. He fell against the hatch controls, coughing blood. I lunged, slamming the release. The hatch hissed open, and I half-dragged, half threw the dying man through, then hurled myself after. A spray of bullets followed, ricocheting off the doorframe as it closed. One round clipped my calf with a searing stripe of pain, but adrenaline allowed me to ignore it for now. We tumbled into the briefing chamber, a small oval room with a strategium table and walls, lined by shelves holding star charts and relics of past voyages. This refuge was temporary at best. Silas knew these ships nearly as well as I. The hatch behind me thumped as someone tried the handle, then a muffled curse. They'd have to cut through or find another way around. The guard who had come with me was beyond saving. The lasbolt to his spine had charged straight through. He looked up at me, mouth moving. I knelt, cradling his head as he gurgled final words. For the Emperor, sir," he gasped. His eyes glazed over a moment later. I gently laid him down, anger flaring hot and righteous in my chest. I did a quick ammo check. My last pistol's pack was spent. I tossed it aside and gingerly picked up the guard's shotgun. Only 2 shells left in the feed. Emperor, damn it. I scavenged a combat knife from his belt as well, fastening its sheath to my own. Think, Cassius, you're alive for now, but cornered. The bridge is lost. Silas has control, probably mostly. Did they kill everyone? Possibly not. Maybe some taken prisoner. But likely casualties are high. My mind raced. The ship's intervox had fallen silent. Likely one of the first things Silas disabled was comms. The only hope was that elsewhere on the Glory, loyal crew still held out, or at least that the Vengeance, my escort frigate, realized something was wrong. The Vengeance had been running patrol a short distance off our port quarter. If its captain, Daniel, saw the firefight or the enemy ship, he might intervene. But the enemy cruiser was still out there too. Through the bulkhead, I felt a rumble, perhaps more impacts from the space battle. My flagship was likely still exchanging blows with the foe, but without bridge command, it would be disjointed. Silas might try to withdraw or surrender the ship to them. Perhaps that was his plan all along. Deliver the glory of Terra and me on a platter to some pirate king in exchange for a partnership. But no, if that were the case, why the bomb and bloodbath on the bridge? No pirate would be pleased at a ship full of mutinied, dead crew. This felt more like Silas wanted to take the ship and whatever treasure was on that hulk for himself. The warrant. My stomach clenched. Could that be it? Without the warrant, I was nothing. With it, he could attempt to usurp my title, but only my bloodline could legally hold it, unless he planned to falsify that I was dead and he was the designated heir or some such audacious lie. However, Silas had to know a warrant isn't just a scrap of paper. It's tied to a name and line. Unless, Emperor's mercy, unless he had outside backing to legitimize a claim. Could some corrupt official or inquisitor be involved? The thought chilled me, but I had no time to mull it. A heavy clang from the hatch jerked me to attention. They were cutting through with a plasma torch or breaching tool. I had maybe a minute. The briefing chamber had another exit, one leading to my private quarters and from there, deeper into the ship. I had to move. But before I slipped out, my gaze fell on something mounted on the wall, a polished wood case holding a master-crafted power sword, my family's heirloom blade. In the chaos, I hadn't had it on me. I rarely carried it on the bridge, preferring more modern sidearms for day-to-day. Now, that blade might make the difference. I smashed the glass with the butt of the shotgun, reaching in to grab the hilt of the ornate sword. A slight hum vibrated through my arm as its power field activated along the elegant blade. This sword had tasted Xenos blood on distant battlefields. It would taste traitor's blood today, if the God Emperor willed. Armed now, I exited into my quarters, a richly appointed yet compact suite just aft of the bridge. The noise of battle was somewhat muffled here, but I could still feel faint tremors of distant impacts. In the corridors beyond, I heard shouting and the bark of gunfire. The mutiny was spreading, it seemed. I needed to reach a secure location, perhaps the armory or the engineerium where loyal tech guard might rally. But another priority burned in my mind, the Warrant of Trade. It was kept in a vault shrine deep in the heart of the ship near the Navigator's tower. If Silas hadn't already seized it, I had to. My quarters had a small arming chamber with an access hatch to a maintenance tunnel. I remembered in a flash a potential shortcut. The maintenance shafts, crawl spaces for tech priests and servitors, crisscrossed the ship. If I took the shaft here down 3 levels, I'd come out near the Navigator's sanctum, which was adjacent to the Warrant Vault. It might let me bypass main corridors, where fighting raged. Without hesitation, I pushed aside a tapestry, depicting Saint Drusus subduing some heretic king, how apt, and yanked open the plasteel panel behind it. The narrow tunnel yawned dark and dusty. I slid in, barely fitting with sword and shotgun in tow, and began a hasty descent down a rung ladder. I tried not to think about the enclosed space or the distant creaking of the ship's infrastructure around me. More than once, I'd had to reprimand junior officers for using these passages to sneak around. Now here I was, a captain crawling like a ship rat. Sweat stung my eyes as I navigated, counting junctions. One wrong turn and I could end up lost in the bowels. My left arm throbbed from the plasma burn, and my calf ached where the bullet had grazed. I fought through the pain, later for that, if there was a later. A muffled boom reverberated through the metal around me, nearly shaking me loose from the ladder. Another hit from the enemy ship, perhaps. The glory of Terra could not take endless punishment, not with leadership compromised. We had to end this soon, or there'd be nothing left to fight over. At last, I reached the approximate area. I kicked out a maintenance grate and half fell into a hallway. This was a side passage near the Navigator's chambers. I recognized the gilded devotional script adorning the archway ahead. The air reeked of spilled promethium and scorched wiring. The lights flickered here, too. I crept forward, shotgun raised. Rounding a corner, I stumbled upon a tableau of death. 2 house armsmen lay sprawled in pools of their own blood, bullet holes pockmarking their carapace armor. They'd been guarding the vault antechamber doors, and judging by the smoking barrels of their fallen rifles, they hadn't gone quietly. 3 more bodies in front of the vault, these wearing the uniforms of my crew but carrying blades and guns with a makeshift look. Mutineers or saboteurs. One had been cleaved nearly in half. The Navigator's security servitor, perhaps. Those automatons pack a punch. But the servitor itself was down as well, its mechanical limbs twitching and sparking. My heart sank. The vault door was ajar. The thick adamantium portal bearing the sigils of House Blackthorn hung open, its locking mechanism blown out from the inside with shaped charges. The traitors had already been here. No. I rushed in, heedless of noise. Inside the small sanctum, a single lumen globe swung from a cable, casting frantic shadows. The altar that once held the warrant's reliquary case was empty, shattered glass on the floor, the lock forced. I was too late. A strangled sound escaped my throat, something between a snarl and a groan of despair. They had taken my warrant. My warrant, the very soul of my dynasty. I felt a maddened urge to smash something, to rend the traitors limb from limb. Instead, I took a slow breath, steadying myself as best I could. Control, Cassius. The document is gone, but perhaps not far. If Silas got it, he'd keep it close. Perhaps he took it to ensure I couldn't claim authority or to curry favor with his allies. Either way, if I could find Silas, I'd find the warrant. But first, I had to survive this and get off the ship if it came to that. The thought was like a knife. Leaving my beloved flagship to traitors? But if the alternative was death here and now, I had to consider it. I knelt by one of the slain loyal guards, murmuring a swift blessing for his soul. His plastic tag identified him as Corporal Lin. I recalled his face at the last Emperor's Day banquet, laughing with shipmates. Another debt of blood Silas owed me. From beyond the vault chamber, voices echoed down the hall, harsh, excited. I ducked behind the ruined altar, flexing my grip on the shotgun and sword. Light from bobbing lamps grew stronger. At least 3 or 4 coming by the footsteps. I spared a glance at my plasma-burnt left arm. It throbbed, sticky with half-clotted blood. My sword hand, fortunately, was steady. If this was where I'd make my stand, so be it. The warrant's empty case glinted up at me, and I felt a savage resolve harden. They wouldn't take me as easily. The first traitor stepped through the archway, a hulking brute of a man, one of the lower deck enforcers I dimly recognized, carrying a heavy stubber. His eyes widened as he registered me in the gloom. I didn't give him a chance to raise that gun. 2 shells left or not, I made them count. I pulled the trigger and the shotgun thundered, blowing a fist-sized hole through his chest at close range. He fell back with a gargled scream, blood splattering the entry. I was already moving, tossing aside the now spent shotgun and lunging out with my power sword humming. The corridor beyond was narrow. Perfect. The second man was right behind the first, and I caught him as he tried to bring up an auto-pistol. My blade sheared through his extended arm with a crackle, then swept across his torso. He dropped in pieces, the smell of ozone and seared flesh filling my nostrils. A last shot sizzled past my face from the right. I sidestepped, using the smoking corpse of the brute as momentary cover. 2 more traitors remained in the passage, one with a las gun, another with a shock maul. They looked young, ratings perhaps, faces contorted in frightened determination. For a heartbeat, seeing their youthful features, I felt a twinge of sorrow that these fools had thrown in with this betrayal. Then they charged, and pity left me. The last gunner fired wildly, shots grazing the walls. I barreled forward. He panicked as my sword arced towards him. The stroke cleaved the weapon in half and carved a deep line from his collarbone to hip. He went down with a reedy scream. The last one, the maul wielder, actually managed to swing at me, catching me on my injured left side. The shock sent tendrils of pain through my ribcage, almost making me drop the sword. Gritting my teeth, I caught his follow-up downswing on my blade, the power field shrieking against the energized maul head. He was strong, but desperation lent me an edge. I twisted, slamming my knee into his gut. As he staggered, I reversed my blade and drove it through his sternum. His eyes bulged, a gout of blood speckling his lips as he choked an oath. I didn't recognize his face, and it didn't matter. He was dead in moments, sliding off my blade to the floor. Chest heaving, I took stock. 4 more mutineers down. My position here wouldn't be secret now. More would come looking. The emergency lighting flickered again, painting the carnage in strobes of red and shadow. I had to move. Silas would likely be making for a shuttle or linking with that allied ship. If he had the warrant, he'd try to escape with it now that he'd sabotaged the glory. There was no way he'd sit around on a burning, half-mutinous vessel when he could be away with his prize. As if on cue, a tremor rocked the deck, larger than before. The continuous thud of distant macrocannons had ceased at some point. I only now noticed the eerie absence of our guns firing. Perhaps the batteries were seized or destroyed. The enemy cruiser might be pounding us with impunity now. I cursed under my breath. If the Glory's fate was sealed, I refused to go down with her to satisfy Silas's ego. I was going to live, and I was going to make him pay. I needed to get to the hangar decks where auxiliary craft were, or better yet, signal the Vengeance to scoop me up. The frigate could never stand against a cruiser alone, but maybe they could rescue survivors. The nearest route to the main hangar was through a central lift, but those could be locked down. Alternatively, a maintenance tram along the spine. I tried to recall emergency schematics. The Glory was massive. I had to be smart about navigating now with limited time. As I hurried through the corridors, I heard sporadic gunfire still echoing, small pockets of loyal crew fighting on, perhaps unaware of the broader situation. I avoided large open areas, sticking to the maintenance passages where possible. A few times I encountered isolated crew, some wounded and confused, others who leveled weapons at me until they realized I wasn't a foe. I had little time to rally or explain. I simply barked for any loyalists to head for escape pods or follow if they could. A ragged few trailed in my wake by the time I got near the hangar section. A junior engineer with half his mechadendrites cut off, 2 medici orderlies supporting a limping officer, and a terrified yeoman clutching a last pistol he likely barely knew how to use. They were all that remained of a group that had been ambushed but managed to flee. We reached an observation bay overlooking the main hangar. It was a broad gallery with arched glass windows, now cracked but intact, showing the vast internal space where shuttles and gun cutters were docked. The scene below made my heart sink further. The hangar was a wreck. Fires burned where fuel lines had ruptured, casting flickering light on the twisted remains of our intra-system craft. It looked as if an explosion had ripped through, perhaps sabotage on the fuel stores. A few shuttles were nothing but blackened skeletons of plasteel. One gun cutter lay on its side, wings sheared off. No signs of active battle. It had already been and gone. I scanned frantically for anything usable. There, at the far end, near the yawning hangar bay doors that now exposed the starry void beyond, the void shield still shimmered to keep atmosphere in, thankfully. A lone Aquila lander seemed mostly intact. Its engines were glowing and my heart leapt. It was powering up. Silas? Or some group trying to flee? Through the hazy smoke and distance, I could just make out figures clambering aboard the Aquila. A couple of them turned and fired back toward the interior. Someone was shooting at them from cover behind a toppled cargo crane. I recognized the bark of a naval shotgun, echoing faintly. Without warning, the distinctive blue flare of a plasma weapon arced out from the Aquila's ramp, obliterating whatever resistance had been there. My jaw clenched. That had to be Silas's pistol. He was making his escape. I turned to the few with me. "Silas is in that lander. I'm going after him," I said. One of the medici, a sensible fellow named Crane, I knew, shook his head, eyes wide. "Lord Captain, the hangar's a death trap. There's no way to reach it. The deck is exposed." He was right. With the main floor torn up and void exposed, I couldn't simply run across. But maybe the observation bay likely had emergency grav chutes or an access to upper catwalks. I glanced around and spotted a sealed hatch labeled Emergency Egress. It would lead to a maintenance shaft down to the floor, or perhaps eject a life sled. I hoped for the former. "Get yourselves to the escape pods on Deck 6, I ordered the survivors. "That's an order. I'll not see more good people die on my account." I think a part of me already accepted that chasing Silas was near suicide, but I couldn't let him get away clean. Not with everything. They hesitated, then one by one gave grim nods. They were too spent to argue. With some murmured prayers for my safety, they limped off the way we'd come, headed for the pods. Alone now, I forced open the emergency egress hatch. A narrow ladder ran downward along the bay wall's interior. Below, the hangar floor was about 20 meters down. The Aquila lander's engines flared brighter. It was about to take off. I slid down the ladder recklessly, boots skidding, nearly free-falling the last 10 meters and landing hard amidst some dangling cables and a heap of broken mesh flooring. Pain jolted up my legs, but I kept my footing. The Aquila was maybe 100 meters ahead, hovering slightly as its landing skids lifted. Silas wasn't going to wait. I broke into a sprint across the debris-strewn deck. The artificial gravity was flickering. One moment I felt light, the next heavy, making each stride unpredictable. A figure at the Aquila's hatch noticed me. I saw them point in my direction. Shots rang out, bullets sparking off the deck around me. A ricochet nicked my shoulder guard. I zigzagged, raising my sword since it was all I had. Silas himself appeared in the open hatch. Even at a distance, I recognized that aristocratic sneer. He shouted something and the gunfire ceased. Instead, he raised his plasma pistol, taking careful aim at a fuel canister lying not far ahead of me. My eyes widened. I dove sideways just as Silas fired. The canister erupted in a fireball, the shockwave lifting me off my feet and slamming me onto my back. My vision blurred, ears rang with a high-pitched whine. I tasted blood. Had I bitten my tongue, or was it from the concussion? Probably both. Through the haze, I saw the Aquila begin to ascend, turning toward the hangar force field opening. Silas was leaving, and I lay dazed, nearly broken. No, not yet. Not like this. I willed myself up. My whole body protested, but I staggered upright, one foot sliding on slick blood. My own? Possibly. The Aquila was almost at the opening, maybe 30 meters away now and a few meters off the ground. In a final act of desperation, I mustered a roar from deep in my lungs, half battle cry, half primal anguish, and hurled my power sword like a spear. It spun end over end, trailing sparks from its active blade, and by some miracle of the God Emperor or sheer blind luck, it struck home. The sword plunged into one of the Aquila's thrusters with a burst of electric discharge. The engine sputtered, the lander lurching to one side. I saw panic as Silas disappeared from the hatch interior, likely thrown off balance. The Aquila careened and crashed onto the deck, skidding in a shower of sparks. One of its wings crumpled against the floor, the nose plowing into a stack of munitions crates near the exit. For a heartbeat, I thought the crates would blow, but Providence spared us another explosion. I limped toward the downed shuttle, adrenaline driving me beyond pain. Its remaining engine whined, trying to lift again despite the damage. Emperor. Silas was persistent. I reached the hull just as the side hatch burst open and two figures stumbled out. One was Silas, identifiable by his fine coat now smeared with ash, and the other a lean man with cult tattoos on his bald head, likely one of his new friends. They both looked battered. The cultist raised a stub pistol at me. I had nothing in my hands now, so I did the only thing I could. I rushed him. A shot rang out, grazing past my hip. Then I was upon him, grappling the weapon aside and slamming my head into his nose. He howled, dropping the pistol. I kneed him in the groin, and he collapsed, only to meet a swift end as I snatched his own knife from his belt and drove it up under his chin. Warm blood spattered my arms as I let the body drop. Silas had recovered enough to draw his power sword, the very blade he'd presumably taken from my arms locker earlier. It glowed menacingly as he activated it. We stood facing each other amid the flicker of fires and the distant groan of our dying ship. Just me and him at last. His lip curled, though I saw uncertainty in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to make it this far. "You should have died quietly, Cassius," he spat, breathing hard. "You were always too damned stubborn." I raised my fists, one clutching the bloodied knife, the other empty. I must have looked half dead. I certainly felt it. But I gave him a grin laced with contempt. "Mutiny, betrayal, theft, and now you insult my personality too. You really are determined to offend every last one of my sensibilities, Silas." He sneered, circling slowly. "You're finished. Look around. Your ship is dying, your crew dead or fled. And I have the warrant. Without it, you're nothing but a common renegade." The words stung, mostly because they were true. I had no retort, so I just kept advancing cautiously. He continued, almost shouting now over the background rumble. "I gave you a chance to avoid this. I warned you time and again your recklessness would ruin us. But you wouldn't listen. The house deserved better. Someone who could truly elevate it, not squander it in doomed adventures." He was goading me, trying to justify himself as much as intimidate. "What did you do, Silas?" I growled, angling toward him. "Promise your new pirate friends a share of my legacy? Sell your soul for a shot at playing captain?" I scanned him, searching for any sign of the warrant's casing, likely in a satchel or hidden on him. He gave a short, derisive laugh. "Pirates? You think this is about greed?" "No, Cassius. I've seen what you refuse to see. The stagnation. The Imperium rots. Out here, only the bold and the cunning survive. I allied with those who understand that. They have power you can't imagine." There was a strange fervor creeping into his tone, eyes gleaming fever bright. "With the resources on that hulk and the secrets I've been shown, I'll build something far greater than being a lackey of Terra. The Blackthorn name will rise under my guidance, freer than it ever was under your chains of duty." I realized with a chill that Silas wasn't just staging a simple coup. He had truly gone rogue, perhaps even traitor to the Imperium itself, if his talk of power you can't imagine was what I feared. A whiff of ozone and sulfur emanated from him. Or maybe it was the burning hangar, but I suspected darker influences at work. "I'd rather see our name drowned in oblivion than tainted by heresy," I snarled. There it was, heresy. We both knew that's what this was now. No more pretense. Silas's face twisted. "Then die, blind fool!" With a roar, he lunged. I barely sidestepped his first slash, the power sword singing inches from my chest. The sheer force of his attack sent sparks flying as the blade cut into the deck where I'd stood. I countered by slashing with the cultist's knife at his sword arm. He parried with supernatural speed, the power field shattering the lesser blade into molten shards. I hissed as a piece of hot metal seared my cheek. Now I was weaponless against his crackling sword. He pressed on, swinging again in a wide, horizontal cut to cleave me in two. I ducked under it and threw myself forward, shoulder-checking into his chest. It was like hitting a plasteel wall. The man wore light carapace under his coat, and he was strong. But I knocked him off balance for a second, enough to snatch at the plasma pistol holstered on his belt. I knew that pistol well. It had nearly killed me minutes ago. We grappled, and for a moment it was two wounded animals snarling and straining. He drove an elbow into my wounded arm, sending a bolt of pain through me. I responded by slamming my forehead into his nose, repaying the favor I gave his accomplice. I felt the crunch. He shouted in pain and rage, blood spurting. His grip slackened, and I tore the pistol free. Silas stumbled back, sword still in hand, but his face now a mask of blood. I leveled the plasma gun at him. A part of me screamed to just pull the trigger, end it. But Silas was fast. Even half-blinded, he saw the threat and swung wildly. I jumped back as the blade whooshed in front of me, but it caught the pistol itself, cleaving through the barrel in a burst of hissing coolant and ruined circuitry. The weapon became slag in my hand. So much for that advantage. The air filled with an eerie groan then, a deep metallic lament that signaled something catastrophic within the glory of Terra. Perhaps the reactor finally giving out or another hull breach. Time was almost up. Silas grinned through broken, bloody teeth. "Neither of us is leaving alive, looks like," he gasped, raising his sword for a final blow. "At least I'll take you with me." My odds were grim. Unarmed against a swordsman of Silas's caliber, he had been the one to train our armsmen in fencing, and I was running on fumes, every injury screaming. My gaze darted, desperate for anything useful. Amid the wreckage to my right, I saw the faint glint of my power sword, still lodged in the ruined Aquila's engine where I'd thrown it. It was 10 paces away, maybe more, and Silas stood between me and it. He advanced, clearly intending to end it in one strike. "Yield!" he snarled, spitting blood. I just barked a harsh laugh, inches from his face. "After you," I growled back. He roared and shoved, breaking the lock, then feinted low and swung high. I anticipated it, one of the drills we'd practiced countless times in training. I sidestepped and at last found the opening. His side was exposed, just for a moment. I drove my sword forward with all the strength left in my weary arms. The blade pierced through his side just beneath the ribs, where the carapace armor plating was thinnest. Silas's eyes went wide in shock. He gasped as I wrenched the sword free, a gush of crimson following it. He staggered, one hand dropping to clutch the wound as blood oozed between his fingers. Still, he refused to fall. With a snarl of pure hatred, he swung at me wildly, a last convulsive attempt to cut me down. I parried and our blades clashed again, but his movements were sloppy now, weakening. I stepped in and with a swift slash, I severed his right hand at the wrist. The power sword he held clattered to the deck, fingers still wrapped around the hilt. Silas crumpled to his knees, cradling the stump of his sword arm. He stared at it as if not believing it was real, red pulsing out onto the floor. His voice came in a wet choke. This isn't how it was supposed to." I stood over him, chest heaving, sword raised in case he had any more fight. But he remained on his knees, swaying. In the dim light, he looked small, just another mortal man whose grand dreams were spilling out with his lifeblood. Somehow, I didn't feel triumph, only bitter emptiness and exhaustion. The ship groaned again, and a section of the hangar bay wall collapsed in a shower of sparks. Beyond, through the widening crack, I saw stars and the black void. The glory of Terra was tearing herself apart. I planted my boot on Silas's shoulder and shoved, toppling him onto his back. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. One of his eyes was already clouding. He still tried to speak, voice barely audible. "I would have saved us. You'll see, nothing changes, nothing." I knelt and rifled through his coat with my free hand until I found what I sought. From an inner pocket, I drew the adamantine scroll case emblazoned with the twin-headed eagle of the Imperium and the sigil of my house, the warrant's case. It was warm, slick with Silas's blood. My breath caught. Here it was, against all hope. My hands trembled as I clutched it tight. The very soul of my dynasty was back in my grasp. Silas weakly reached a trembling hand toward me, or rather toward the case, I realized. His eyes fixed on it. "Give it to me," he rasped, as if even now he had some claim. I rose to my feet, clutching the case tightly. I looked down at the traitor who had been my comrade. There was so much I could say to him. Demands for why, condemnations for all those he'd murdered today. But in the end, I simply found I had no words left. Silas let out a final shuddering breath. The light died in his eyes as his head lolled back. First Officer Silas Vane, mutineer, heretic, and thief, was dead. No time for relief. The deck lurched violently, throwing me off balance. A deep fracture split the hangar floor near the Aquila wreck and began spiderwebbing outward. Atmosphere howled as it began venting through new cracks. I realized the void shields at the hangar mouth must have failed. I could feel the air thinning. Clutching the warrant case to my chest with one arm, I stumbled toward the only haven I could think of, the Aquila. Damaged as it was, its hull might still hold pressure. Silas's failed escape vehicle would have to serve as my lifeboat now. I climbed into the ruined lander's cockpit. The interior was a mess of flickering controls and broken glass. One engine was completely destroyed, thanks to my sword, but the other still hummed in standby. The machine spirit's console flickered feebly. Perhaps I could at least seal the hatch and use maneuvering thrusters to push out into space, then signal for help. Working quickly, I slammed the hatch shut and engaged the mag seals. The Aquila shuddered as another chain of explosions rumbled outside. I strapped into the pilot's couch, pushing aside the remains of the actual pilot, who lay dead over the console with a broken neck. I'm no ace pilot, but I know the basics. Through the fractured canopy, I could see debris swirling. I tapped the runes for emergency launch. The remaining engines sputtered and flared to life. With a jolt, the lander lifted unevenly off the deck. Come on, I urged, coaxing the throttle. The machine sputtered forward toward the gaping hangar exit. Outside was open void. The Aquila slid through the failing void shield membrane. For a terrifying second, the craft lurched and spun, caught in a shockwave from the glory of Terra's disintegrating structure. I wrestled with the controls as the dying ship fell away beneath me, belching fire and debris. Then, blessedly, we stabilized, drifting clear into the starry expanse. I allowed myself a single backward glance. There she was, my glory of Terra, pride of my line, breaking apart in silent violence. Chunks of her hull drifted free, and ghostly plumes of venting air and flame wreathed what remained of her mighty frame. The enemy cruiser that had ambushed us was also visible in the distance, moving away perhaps, or maybe just circling the wreck. I did not even care at that moment. My ship was gone. Thousands of lives gone. I felt hot tears on my cheeks. I hadn't even realized I was crying. It lasted only a heartbeat. There was too much yet to do to give in to grief. Focusing on the here and now, I activated the distress beacon and voxed out on all frequencies. Mayday, Mayday, this is Cassius Blackthorn. To any loyal Imperial vessel, I am in need of immediate assistance. My voice was shaking but intelligible. To my surprise and profound relief, I got a reply almost immediately. Aquila Lander, this is the frigate Vengeance. Lord Captain, we have you on auspex. It was the voice of Captain Denel, my frigate's commander, strained but alive. By the throne, we thought you lost. We're moving to retrieve you. The lights in the Aquila flickered. Fuel was nearly exhausted and power failing. Hurry, I transmitted back weakly, then added, be advised, glory of Terra is lost. Enemy presence unknown. Exercise caution. Through the small viewport, I caught sight of the Vengeance, a sleek dagger shape moving toward me amidst the debris field. Tears threatened again at seeing an ally intact. I clutched the warrant case with white-knuckled intensity, as if it alone anchored me to reality. Within minutes, the frigate's running lights were upon me. Skilled pilots maneuvered a recovery cradle to latch onto the drifting Aquila. Metal groaned as mag clamps seized my little craft. I released a breath I didn't know I'd held. Saved. Emperor be praised. When the Achilles' hatch was finally pried open by Vengeance crew, they found me half-conscious, still strapped in, refusing to let go of the adamantine warrant case. It took the ship's confessor and 2 medics to convince me I was safe, that I could unbuckle and come out. I don't remember much of those first moments aboard. Just blurred faces. Someone reporting Silas's betrayal had triggered skirmishes on the Vengeance too, swiftly put down once news of the flagship's demise came, and the Navigator saying something about a warp jump to escape the enemy cruiser. I must have passed out shortly after, from blood loss and exhaustion, because the next thing I knew, I was lying in the frigate's Medicae ward with a half-dozen tubes stuck in me and the steady throb of warp engines humming through the deck. Alive. I was alive. And I had my warrant back. By some Emperor-granted miracle, or perhaps just sheer obstinacy, I had pried victory from that nightmare. Pain and light. Those were the first sensations as I clawed my way back to consciousness. A dull, throbbing pain that seemed to emanate from everywhere in my body, and a harsh white lumen globe shining overhead. For a panicked moment I flailed, thinking I was still adrift in the void amid burning wreckage. But a firm hand pressed me down. "Steady, Lord Captain. You're safe. You're aboard the Vengeance." The voice was gentle, familiar. Confessor Thomas, the ship's elderly Ministorum priest, loomed into view. His lined face hovered above me, framed by the white cowl of his vestments. I blinked, orienting myself. I was lying on a cot in the Medicae ward. The air smelled of antiseptic and incense. The distant vibration of warp engines told me we were already in transit. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry as a desert. Thomas brought a small cup to my lips. Blessed recycled water. I drank in small sips until my voice croaked back to life. How long? He understood my incomplete question. 3 days, give or take, since we pulled you from the Aquila. You were badly wounded, my son. The Emperor saw fit to keep your soul tethered to your flesh, but it was a near thing. 3 days. Emperor. I struggled to sit up, wincing at a flare of pain from my bandaged side and arm. The confessor gently helped prop me against a stack of pillows. The Medicae ward around us was dim and quiet, only a few other occupied cots further down. I recognized one patient as the Vengeance's helmswoman, a young woman with a missing arm, likely lost in whatever skirmishes occurred during the mutiny. As memory flooded back, my hand shot to my chest. The warrant! But I immediately felt the reassuring hardness of the adamantine case resting on a stand beside my cot. Someone had set it there, perhaps knowing I'd want it close. I exhaled in relief, touching the engraved Aquila on its surface, as if to confirm it was real. We dared not pry it from your hands until the Medicae had to patch you up, Tomas said with a faint smile, following my gaze. Even unconscious, you wouldn't let it go. I could well believe that. My cheeks heated slightly, embarrassed at the thought of me clutching the damn thing like a child's doll. But then perhaps it wasn't so absurd. That charter was everything, or had been. My attention snapped back to the present. "Status report," I rasped. Reflex, drilled by decades of command. "The Vengeance, the crew, Captain Danel." Before Tomas could answer, another figure approached from the shadows. Captain Danel himself, commander of the Vengeance, dressed in a crisp navy coat with his left arm in a sling. He managed a weary salute. "Lord Captain, it's good to see you awake, sir." I nodded, gesturing for his report. Danel was a capable officer. I'd personally selected him to captain my escort frigate years ago. Now, effectively, he was the captain of my only ship. My only ship. Throne. That realization stung. Danel cleared his throat. "We translated to the warp shortly after recovering you. That enemy cruiser tried to close on us, but with the Glory's sacrifice and some strafing runs from our gun decks, we bought enough time to escape. We set course spinward toward Footfall, as it's the nearest port. We should arrive within the day. Footfall, the ramshackle pirate haven at the edge of the Koronus Expanse. Yes, that made sense. Going straight back to Imperial space via the maw in our battered state, with possibly hostile forces behind, would have been risky. Footfall was closer and offered some shelter, albeit a lawless one. I gave a small grunt of approval. "Casualties?" I asked, bracing myself. Donald's expression grew somber. Aboard the Vengeance, we put down a few attempted mutinies once word spread about Silas's betrayal. It seems he had coordinated with a handful of malcontents on our ship as well, likely planning to seize the Vengeance after dealing with you. We rooted them out quickly when she blew. But we lost 23 crew in the crossfire. Another 30 or so injured, like Helm Officer Rizzo over there. He nodded toward the young woman with one arm. I closed my eyes briefly. More loyal blood spilled by that snake. Daniel continued quietly. Of the glory of Terra's complement, we managed to recover only a few survivors from the wreckage. A dozen crew floating in void suits that we scooped up after you. That's all, sir. The rest... He trailed off, not needing to finish. The rest were gone. Thousands of men and women who had crewed my flagship over the years. People I dined with, disciplined, bled with in battle. People I had commanded and, in some sense, cared for. Now vapor and ash. I swallowed, my throat tightening. Confessor Tomas murmured a prayer under his breath, making the sign of the Aquila. I found myself murmuring along, "Emperor, receive their souls, for they died in your service." Silence fell for a moment in the med bay, broken only by the soft beeping of biomonitors. Finally, I opened my eyes and looked to Dynel. Any sign of Silas's allies? Did we identify who that cruiser belonged to? Daniel shook his head. No positive ID. It wasn't transmitting any known Imperial codes, nor pirate banners we recognized. It could have been operating under false signals. The Expanse has all sorts of scum, possibly backed by a renegade faction, or even a Xenos vessel disguised. We just know it hit hard and had advanced weaponry. "Chaos," I said flatly. Tomas winced at the word. Most pious folk preferred euphemisms like archenemy or the enemy beyond. But I was beyond caring for niceties. That ship was likely chaos. Silas rambled about power and rising beyond the Imperium. It fits. Daniel grimaced. "If so, then we're lucky we got away when we did. A chaos warship. Emperor forbid it catches us alone." My jaw clenched. I despised needing to run, but I also wasn't foolish. A lone frigate with skeleton crew wouldn't last long against such a foe. "We'll reach Footfall soon," I said. "We can resupply, make contact with any Imperial agents or the Navy picket in the area for reinforcement." "Understood, sir." Daniel hesitated, then continued. "Sir, the crew. What remains of them? They're shaken. Many had friends and family on the Glory. And with the warrant?" He nodded toward the case. "Well, rumors run wild. Some fear that without the flagship and with the warrant temporarily stolen, that our dynasty is effectively over. That the Inquisition or Navy might seize assets, or that we're cursed." He looked genuinely pained to voice these things. I forced a weary smile. "Cursed? Perhaps we are. Emperor knows it feels like it." I rubbed my temples, feeling the weight of every loss press on me. "But the warrant is here, intact." A tiny voice in my head added, "I hope it's intact." I hadn't opened the case yet to inspect the venerable parchment inside. A part of me was afraid to, irrationally fearing it might somehow have vanished or been destroyed during all that chaos. "As long as I carry this," I went on, tapping the case, "the line isn't dead. The crew will have to see that I'm still their rogue trader, battleship or no. We'll get a new ship, rebuild somehow. I realized I was saying it more to convince myself than Donald. The captain gave a firm nod. Aye, sir, I believe it. We'll follow your lead. His loyalty was evident, and it bolstered me. But I also caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was pragmatic enough to know our situation was dire. After he departed to resume his duties, Confessor Thomas remained by my bedside. He took my hand gently, much as a father might. You carry a great burden, Lord Captain. The God Emperor has tested you fiercely. I let out a low, humorless chuckle. Tested. If I didn't know better, I'd say he's trying to break me, Thomas. The old priest shook his head. Faith, my son. Faith sustains in the darkest times. You have come through betrayal, fire, and the void itself. There is a purpose in this, even if unseen. Perhaps the purpose is to show me just how much worse things can get, I muttered dryly, though I gave a slight, apologetic nod after saying it. Thomas had nothing but good intentions. He offered a thin smile. You jest, but I see strength in you still, and defiance. The enemy did its damnedest to destroy your spirit, yet here you sit, making plans. I snorted softly. What else can I do? Lie down and die? I'm too bloody-minded for that, apparently. Thomas chuckled. And that, Lord Captain, is why I think the Emperor yet favors you. Obstinate as you may be. He then grew more serious. I will continue to minister to the crew. Many are shaken in faith. The idea of a trusted officer turning heretic and nearly killing us all. It has rattled them deeply. I'll do what I can to restore their spirits. Thank you, Thomas, I replied quietly. They'll listen to you, perhaps more than to me at the moment. Later that ship's night, Confessor Thomas held a brief memorial service in the Vengeance's diminutive chapel. The space was cramped and austere, nothing like the grand sanctum that once graced the Glory's middeck, but it served. I stood at the back as the confessor led us in prayer. A couple dozen crew were present, those off-duty or wounded who could attend. The rest would catch the next service, he promised. Flickering candlelight danced off their weary faces. Thomas's voice was steady as he intoned the litany of the departed. When he reached the lines, "Though they journey now beyond the veil, we commend their souls to the Emperor's grace," I felt a sting in my eyes. One by one, he read the names of confirmed fallen. So many familiar names. Petty Officer Gast, who always sang bawdy marching songs during warp translations. Navigator's mate Harlan, a different Harlan than my guard, who used to regale the mess with tall tales of his Hive City youth. Chief Steward Marla, who had fussed at me just last week for skipping meals. Enginseer Prime Galen, who never met a machine he couldn't coax back to life. Each name was a weight on my heart. I closed my eyes, bowing my head with the rest. In that solemn moment, grief threatened to swamp me. The faces of my lost crew swam behind my eyelids, too many to count. I could almost hear their voices echoing in the quiet hum of the chapel. Silently, I swore an oath to each of them that their deaths would not be in vain. When the service concluded, Thomas gave a final benediction. In the Emperor's name we mourn, and in his service we continue. A fitting summation, I thought. The crew filed past me as they left, offering faint smiles or nods. I remained a moment in the candlelight, hand pressed to the cold steel of a devotional plaque on the wall. A fragment of scripture about perseverance. It felt poignant. Only once the candles were snuffed did I return to the duties at hand. I gingerly swung my legs off the cot and stood. My muscles protested, but I needed to move, to feel like myself again. Ignoring the stab of pain in my bandaged side, I retrieved the warrants case with my good hand and made my way out of the Medicaid ward. As I walked the narrow corridors of the Vengeance, crew members halted and stared, then bowed or saluted respectfully. I could see the relief and perhaps uncertainty in their eyes. Lord Blackthorn lives. What now? I gave polite nods, even mustered a reassuring smile or two. Emperor alone knew how convincing I was, with a face bruised, sutures on my temple, and moving like an old man with arthritis. But I held my head high. By the time I reached my quarters, a far more modest cabin compared to the luxurious suite I'd had on the Glory, I felt sweat on my brow and my pulse pounding from the exertion. Thrown, I wasn't fully healed at all. Collapsing into a chair, I set the warrant's case on the metal desk before me. It glinted dully in the cabin's lumen light. How many times had I seen this case and felt only pride and security? Now I gazed at it with conflicted emotions. This object had nearly cost me everything, or rather my dependence on it had. Rogue traders are powerful, yes, but in part we're just as chained. To duty, to reputation, to that scrap of authority on paper. Without it, what was I? Just another voidfarer with a private army, easily labeled a pirate or renegade. Slowly, I unlatched the case and opened it. Inside, wrapped in protective red velvet, was the ancient parchment of the Warrant of Trade granted to House Blackthorn. I carefully lifted it out and unrolled it on the desk. The parchment crackled faintly. Elegant high Gothic script covered its surface, illuminated with gold leaf and bearing the official seals of the Ministorum Imperialis. I saw the signature of Golgana Angevine at the bottom, near a faded signet of the High Lords from that era, and the counterseal of Saint Drusus, the patron saint of the Calixis sector. All of it, the same text I'd read with awe as a boy upon inheriting it. It was intact. No tear, no burn mark. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. In the chaos of the confrontation with Silas, it seemed almost impossible this fragile document survived unscathed, but by the Emperor's grace, it had. Perhaps Silas, even in his madness, had handled it gingerly. He knew its value. As my eyes roamed the script, emotions swelled. Sorrow, remembering my father presenting it to me, anger at how close it came to being lost. At the very top, the name of our founding ancestor was calligraphed, Sebastian Thorvard Blackthorn, and below, added later in simpler script, each successive holder's name and dates of tenure. My own name was the last, Cassius Blackthorn, M41. A blank space waited beneath for an heir that did not yet exist. So many Blackthorns through the centuries, none dishonored until now. I had almost been the one to fail our line irredeemably. A hot tear splashed on the parchment as I leaned over it. I hurriedly dabbed it off before the moisture could mar the ink. "Get a hold of yourself," I chided internally. "You can mourn later. Now is for action." I rolled the warrant back up and returned it to its case, sealing it. For now, I resolved to keep it near me at all times until we were on secure footing. Emperor forbid I let that be stolen again. A chime at my door announced someone outside. "Enter!" I called. It was Navigator Algrim, the same woman whose voice had guided us out of warp into the ambush. She was clad in her customary muted gray robes. The upper half of her face was obscured by a porcelain mask covering her warp eye. Without preamble, she said, "Lord Captain, we are nearing translation to real space. Footfall is close." "Thank you, Lady Algrim," I replied. I studied her for a moment. Navigators rarely left their chambers unless necessary. It was unusual to see her in person. Perhaps she wished to speak of something. Her thin lips pressed together before she spoke again, more softly. "I wish to extend my condolences for the loss of your ship and so many lives, and my gratitude that you survived." Many navigators have perished along with their vessels. I'm relieved I was not added to that tally. There was a flicker of emotion in her visible eye. I inclined my head. Olysia Ogrim had been with me since the beginning of my command. She had guided the glory of Terra through 100 warp passages. That she survived was indeed a boon. Losing one's navigator is another catastrophic blow for any warp-capable ship. I'm thankful for your survival as well, Olysia, I said, using her first name. Something I did rarely, but we had a rapport. We'll need your skills in the days to come more than ever. She hesitated. There is one more thing, Lord Captain. A pause, as if choosing words. During the warp translation just now, I sensed how to describe a turbulence, a malevolence brushing against our Gellar Field. A shiver crept up my back. Warp travel always has whispers and turbulence, but a navigator usually doesn't bother the captain with routine bumps. You think it was something out of the ordinary? I asked, frowning. Olysia nodded slowly. Yes, an unquiet presence. It felt focused, almost as if searching. I could swear at one point I heard a voice. She looked embarrassed. Perhaps it was a hallucination. It happens sometimes, even to us. But it spoke your name, Lord Captain. My blood ran cold. My name. She nodded again, one hand fiddling nervously with a fold of her robe. I did not imagine it. Cassius. Clear as day, whispering through the warp currents, and a sense of hunger behind it. I took a long breath. Silas's allies, no doubt. If a demon or sorcerer was involved in this conspiracy, they might very well be hunting me in the immaterium, perhaps enraged that I snatched back what they wanted. Thank you for telling me, I said gravely. Ensure the Gellar Field and warp wards are in top shape for the next jump. Perhaps double the usual prayers and incantations for good measure. Already done, she responded. The Confessor and I have sanctified the Navigator's chamber thrice since departure. Trust Olysia to be proactive. We will be vigilant, Lord Captain, but be wary. Such a thing, if it truly knows your name and seeks you, it may try subtler means than brute force. It could send nightmares, influence minds. Her one visible eye flickered to the warrant case and back to me. Corrupt loyalties. We've seen it happen. I grimaced. I'll be on guard, I said. Olysia nodded behind her porcelain mask. I shall continue my vigil, Lord Captain, she said softly before excusing herself. That particular trick wouldn't work a second time, I told myself, though whether to convince her or me, I wasn't sure. With a formal bow, the Navigator departed. I felt unsettled. It seemed even within the safety of my ship, the war for my life might not be over. The thought of some unseen warp predator prowling for me frayed my nerves more than I liked to admit. I strapped on a flak vest under a fresh uniform and belted my sidearm, a trusty las pistol since my ornate one had been lost on the Glory, and a combat knife for good measure. If another unexpected attack came, even on board, I wouldn't be caught half-dressed. By the time I made my way to the bridge, the Vengeance was moments from translating out of warp. I took a seat in the captain's throne beside Danel's command station, my rightful place, though I had to resist wincing as my wounds pulled. Translation in 10 seconds, came the vox from Olysia's sanctum. I clenched the armrests. Even in a smaller ship, I hated this part. The familiar lurch and nausea hit as we tore back into reality. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the star-dusted blackness of real space. And in the distance, the glinting spiderweb of lights that was Footfall. Footfall. At first glance, it resembles a cluster of misshapen rocks hanging in space, which is exactly what it is. Countless asteroids lashed together by great adamantine chains, each rock studded with Gothic spires, docking ports, and markets. It's a thief's paradise, a trader's bazaar, and a seeker's den of sin all rolled into one. At its center looms a massive stone face carved in the likeness of the God Emperor, or some exaggerated interpretation thereof, mouth open in a silent scream. The great icon that greets all visitors, often dubbed the Emperor's Scowl. It's said some heretical sect maintains that idol, but no one has yet blasted it down. As the vengeance approached under thruster power, we were hailed by Footfall's port authorities, which is to say, a cartel of criminal magnates who ran the place. Formalities were short. I was known to them by reputation, if not personally. The Glory of Terra had docked here on occasion. They would have been expecting that grand cruiser again, not this lone frigate. I could almost hear the speculation through the calm, but they cleared us to dock at one of the larger piers after I transmitted my credentials and identified myself. Docking clamps thudded into place. Through the auger slits, I could see the teeming docks. Void workers, servitors, merchants with cargo, and the ever-present horde of laborers and beggars that swarmed visiting vessels hoping for coin or a chance to escape Footfall. I stood, straightening my coat and ensuring my signet ring, bearing the crest of House Blackthorn, was visible on my finger. Let's go see what the galaxy has to say about our little drama, shall we? Daniel stayed to oversee the crew and security. We'd be fools not to leave a strong guard on the Vengeance. And I took a small coterie with me, Confessor Thomas, 2 armsmen as escorts, and Magos Raal, our surviving tech priest, whose mechadendrites whirred quietly as he followed along, eager to acquire spare parts and tech data at the Footfall markets. The moment I stepped onto the Footfall docking pier, I felt the change in atmosphere, both literal and figurative. The air here was thick with incense attempting to mask industrial fumes and less savory odors. Vox-hailers blared a mixture of prayers and advertisements for various illicit services. A procession of indentured servants shuffled by carrying crates stamped with trade house emblems. Over it all rose the clamor of hundreds of languages and dialects being spoken at once. After the confines of my ship, the chaotic openness of it was almost dizzying. A representative of Footfall's liege, the closest thing this place has to a governor, approached. A thin man in a brocade jacket with cybernetic eyes. He bowed obsequiously. "Lord Blackthorn, welcome to Footfall. We, heard rumors of unfortunate events. Our condolences for your losses." His tone was polite, but I could detect the probing curiosity. "Appreciated," I replied curtly. I had no intention of spilling my woes to a functionary. My business here is resupply and repair. I'll also require replacement crew. I nearly choked on the last part, thinking of having to fill the void of all those fine people with whoever I could scrounge from Footfall's dregs. "Of course, my lord, Footfall is at your service, should you require a private meeting chamber or lodging planet-side." "That won't be necessary," I cut in. "We won't linger beyond what's needed." The man bowed again, realizing I was not in the mood for small talk. "As you wish. Please enjoy our port's amenities. We'll expedite any requests from your officers." He backed away with another flourish, likely off to tattle to his liege that House Blackthorn's heir has come in on a single frigate with his tail between his legs. Ignoring the whispers and stares from dock workers, news travels fast. By now, everyone on this pier must have realized that the famed Blackthorn flagship was absent. I led my party inward. The plan was to visit a few key locales, the Kasbalika markets for supplies, the hiring halls for crew, and a certain contact of mine who often had useful intelligence about happenings in the Expanse. As we walked through the winding metal thoroughfares lit by flickering lumen strips and open fires, I felt on edge. Footfall can smell weakness. A rogue trader arriving in diminished state is like blood in the water to the sharks of this place, rivals, opportunists, even assassins. Confessor Tomas stayed close, staff topped with an imperial aquila in hand, offering a visible symbol of ecclesiarchy presence. It probably dissuaded some pickpockets and cutthroats along the way. My two armsmen, Harlan and Steuben, reliable brutes with shotguns, flanked me, glaring at anyone who approached too near. We passed under the shadow of the great statue of the Emperor Scowl. I glanced up. In the eye sockets of the massive stone face, I could see tiny lights. The dwellings of some of Footfall's elite built into the idol. To live in the Emperor's eye, it was both blasphemous and oddly fitting for this den. Our first stop was a warehouse-turned-market hall, where Magos Real separated to acquire needed parts and ammunition for the vengeance. I gave him authority to dip into our remaining funds. We had lost a fortune in material with the glory, but I kept reserves scattered around ports for emergencies like this. Real skittered off, his metallic limbs clanking eagerly. Nothing cheers a tech priest like a shopping spree of cogitators and plasma coils. Next, I headed to the indenture hall, essentially a slave market, though they prefer the term servitor and bondsman exchange to avoid offense. Here, under the baleful gaze of carved gargoyles, auctioneers were selling contracts of laborers, ratings, even skilled voidsmen down on their luck, and willing to sign on with any ship that'd have them. Under normal circumstances, House Blackthorn would never stoop to recruiting from such a dubious source. But these weren't normal times. I needed hands to run the vengeance. Quality would be hit or miss, but beggars, or nearly beggared rogue traders, can't be choosers. I watched a few lots, a batch of heavy labor servitors, pass, we had enough servitors, a scrappy clan of void-born riggers whose transport got impounded, they might do, an entire family of Hive-world refugees with experience in macro works, tempting, though families complicate discipline. Ultimately, I purchased the contracts of around 50 individuals, a mix of voidsmen, a couple of junior engineers to bolster Hal's team, and some gunners. It cost a painful amount of thrones, and I knew integrating these strangers would be a challenge, but it was a start. Before releasing payment, I took a moment to speak with a few of them. One voidsman with a scarred face stepped forward, glancing at my signet ring. "Begging your pardon, Lord, but we heard House Blackthorn hit hard times. That true?" A hush fell. Clearly rumors of my misfortunes had reached even here. I squared my shoulders. "We had a setback," I replied evenly. "Lost a ship and good people, but House Blackthorn endures. If you sign on with me, you'll share in both the trials and the triumphs to come." The scarred voidsman considered, then gave a firm nod. "Aye, sir. That's good enough for me." A few others murmured agreement. "I will not promise easy days," I continued, letting my voice carry. "But I can promise a chance at honor, glory, and a fair share of the Emperor's fortune if we find it." It was half Navy recruitment spiel, half genuine appeal. I saw postures relax, some eyes even kindle with a spark of optimism. Desperate people seldom get such promises with sincerity. With that settled, I authorized the transfer of funds and had the indenture papers stamped with my seal. They lined up, newly indentured to House Blackthorn for a term of years, looking both relieved and apprehensive. Perhaps they'd heard rumors too. I gave a brief address, assuring them they'd get fair treatment and a chance for glory if they worked hard. My voice sounded convincing enough. The confessor's presence likely helped, making them think twice about causing trouble. Finally, I broke away from the noise and press of the public areas to visit an old acquaintance. On Footfall, information is as valuable as gold, and one of the best info brokers is a woman known as Madame Vila. She runs a pleasure house, ostensibly catering to carnal delights. But the real business happens in whispered conversations over fine amasec in her private lounge. I've dealt with her before. She's discreet and plugged into the station's rumor mill. Leaving my almsmen at the door, they waited in the foyer, uncomfortable amid the silken drapes and perfumed air. I entered Vela's sanctum alone. Thomas tactfully remained outside as well. He disapproves of the place, though he keeps those opinions mild in my presence. Vila reclined on a chaise beneath a lazy fan of hololights, simulating a tropical Terran sunset. She was, as I remembered, ageless in that way, achieved by expensive juvenat treatments, with bronze skin and a cascade of black hair, wearing a gown that managed to be both elegant and revealing. "My dear Lord Blackthorn," she purred as I entered. "Or may I simply say Cassius, considering the circumstances?" Her eyes glinted with knowing. I gave a polite half-smile and inclined my head. "Madame Vila, I assume you've heard some version of events already, so perhaps we can skip feigned pleasantries?" She laughed, a musical sound. "Straight to business, then. Very well. What I've heard is that the great glory of Terra went up in flames in the void, presumably with your esteemed self aboard, and that a certain frigate limped in your stead. The rumor mongers are having a field day. Some say you found something cursed out there. Others whisper of mutiny. One fanciful tale even has it that you angered an elder witch queen." She winked. "You can imagine. Truth is in short supply. Care to enlighten me?" I studied her as I settled into a leather chair opposite. Vela deals in secrets, not charity. If I gave her a juicy truth, she'd owe me compensation in info or favors. Fine, some truth I could give. "A trusted officer betrayed me and seized an opportunity to grab power," I said evenly. "He was in league with unsavory forces. The glory is lost along with much of my crew. I survived by a hair's breadth and took my vengeance. That's the succinct version." Vela arched a sculpted eyebrow. How dramatic, and entirely believable. She swirled a glass of amasec and offered me one. I waved it off politely. "House Blackthorn falls victim to internal treachery. My, that will travel fast. The other rogue traders will weep and sharpen their knives in equal measure." I snorted. "Let them. I'm not finished yet." "Oh, I never thought you were, dear." She flashed a sympathetic smile. "Now, how can I assist? I presume you didn't come just to confirm gossip. You need information." "Correct. I need to know who exactly my traitorous friend was dealing with. The ship that attacked us, any cults or gatherings in this region recently that might fit, and anything you have on an item or objective out in the fringes that would tempt a man to sell his soul." Vela's expression turned thoughtful. There have been whispers. There's been increased activity among the Stygian cults here on Footfall. They've been gathering resources quietly, shipping them out ostensibly to mining colonies. But I suspect they're provisioning something, or someone. The Stygian cults worship the god of change, if you get my drift. Tzeentch, I thought. That would align with Silas's sudden cunning and warp trickery. She continued. "One name I've heard is Vorlin Ormiel, an apostate scholar turned cult leader. He vanished from Footfall about a month ago after spending a small fortune hiring a crew of cutthroats and buying prescribed archaeological equipment. Word is he shipped out on a cruiser with blacked-out transponders, possibly the one you encountered." My jaw tightened. "Do you know where they went?" Vela shook her head. "Not precisely, but he was obsessed with finding a particular space hulk rumored to be translating in and out of the warp near the Syrian Gulf. Something called the Empyrean's Hand. He thought it held a prize. Empyrean's Hand, yes, that was exactly what we sought. So Silas hadn't stumbled on this accidentally. He might have been in league with this Vorlin Ormael from the start, feeding him information and coordinating. The betrayal could have been long in planning. He likely offered your officer something irresistible in exchange for cooperation, Vela said. Power, secret knowledge. Men like Ormael can be very persuasive. I bet, I muttered bitterly. Persuasive enough that I now have a warp predator whispering my name in the Empyrean. Vela's eyes narrowed. You felt its presence? I have a capable navigator. She detected a voice pursuing me. That's why I'm keen on knowing what we're dealing with. The madam took a slow sip, considering. Vorlin was said to carry a powerful tome, an original copy of the Book of Cadence, filled with dark rituals to summon and bind warp entities. If he used it to aid your mutineer, then such an entity might have marked you. I would be cautious. I repressed a sigh. More good news. If it's marked me, it's marked me. I won't cower in a cellar over it. But forewarned is forearmed. Vela set her glass down, leaning forward slightly. I do have one more tidbit, but it's delicate. It concerns the official response to these events. I tensed. Go on. She lowered her voice, though we were quite alone. There's an Inquisitor on Footfall, Ordo Hereticus, I believe. He arrived only yesterday, likely following threads of this same cult activity. I suspect he already knows some version of what happened to you. Inquisitors tend to sniff out such high-profile heresy quickly. He may want to speak with you. My stomach did a little flip. An Inquisitor's attention is rarely a good thing. At best, a painful interrogation to confirm I wasn't complicit. At worst, summary execution if he had any doubts about my purity. Still, perhaps I could turn it to advantage. If I convinced him to focus on Ormael, he might handle the demon chasing me. Name? I asked. Inquisitor Cortez, she said. He's incognito, of course, staying at the Liege's own manse. But I can arrange a subtle introduction if you desire. I waited. Avoiding him might look suspicious. Seeking him out might be dangerous, but also could show confidence. I nodded slowly. Yes, arrange it. As you wish, Vela smiled, finishing her drink. Consider that last piece a freebie for old friendship's sake, and perhaps a hope that House Blackthorn remembers who aided it in dark tears when fortunes rise again. You have my thanks, Phyla. If I have a throne to my name in a year, you'll find a generous gift delivered. I meant it. Information like this was life-saving. We parted on good terms. I stepped back out into the chaotic corridor, motioning for my guards and Tomas to rejoin. Updating them briefly, I said, Seems we have an appointment with the Holy Ordos. We best not keep him waiting. A short time later, under discreet escort from Footfall's household guards, I found myself in a lavish audience chamber carved into a cavern within one of the asteroids. Velvet drapes and gilded skull motifs everywhere, the Liege's decor taste, I suppose. And standing before a large stained glass window depicting the God Emperor triumphing over a dragon, a Prosperin dragon maybe, was Inquisitor Cortez. He was tall, whipcord lean, wearing a simple yet finely tailored black doublet without ostentation. Only a small rosette pinned at his collarbone, the mark of the Inquisition, gave away his station. He turned as I entered, fixing me with a pair of intense gray eyes. I immediately felt like a specimen on a slide. Lord Captain Cassius Blackthorn, he said evenly. His voice was surprisingly soft. Or do you prefer simply Rogue Trader, given recent events? Starting with a cut. I inclined my head politely. Inquisitor. Lord Captain is fine. It's a title I intend to keep. His lips quirked, not quite a smile. Confidence, that's good. You know why I'm here? I can guess. The mess involving my former first officer and whatever heresy he was dabbling in. Correct. I require a full account from your own lips for the record. He gestured to a servo-skull floating nearby, its augur recording devices blinking. I spent the next quarter hour relaying the tale, the salient points at least. I hid nothing about Silas's betrayal, the Chaos ship, or the fact that it was likely a Tzeentchian cult orchestrating things. I left out only what I thought tactically wise. The persistent warp presence stalking me, though he likely deduced some of that, and the minor detail that my warrant had been physically snatched. I phrased it as Silas tried and failed, which is true from a certain point of view. Cortez listened without interruption, eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he tapped a finger on his arm thoughtfully. A grave series of events. House Blackthorn has my sympathy, and the Imperium has my thanks, for you eliminated one heretic already. Vorlin Ormael remains to be dealt with. I trust you'll handle that, Inquisitor, I said. He's beyond my reach for now. Cortez nodded. Indeed, we have leads and now your testimony to add. My team will track him down. With any luck, he and his pet sorcerer will meet the Emperor's judgment swiftly. I detected a note of zeal. Clearly Cortez relished the idea. Good, we were on the same side for now. He then stepped closer, studying me. Now, as to you. You realize some might question your own innocence in this? Here it comes. I drew myself up. I do. Allow me to put such questions to rest. I had no knowledge of Silas's treachery until he opened fire on me. I remain a loyal servant of the throne. My record should speak for itself. Decades of successful operations and service at the Imperium's fringes. No taint of heresy or disloyalty. He raised an eyebrow. True, except perhaps an instance of trading with Xenos beyond regulated limits. He flicked open a small ledger. Damnation, he had done homework. That likely referred to a minor incident years back, where I bartered with a cold trader for Eldar trinkets. Perfectly common among rogue traders, but technically frowned upon. That was dealt with by Administratum fine, I said through a thin smile. No further infractions. Hardly enough to paint me a heretic, wouldn't you say? Cortez let the silence hang, then gave a slight nod. Agreed. I see no evidence that you were anything but the victim here. If I did, well, we'd not be conversing so cordially. My shoulders eased a bit. This was as close to a clean bill of health as I'd get from the Inquisition verbally. Of course, he could always change his mind later, but I suspected he was satisfied. I will expect you to remain available for further questioning should it be required, he added as a formality. Naturally, I'm at His Majesty's service, I replied. His gaze drifted to the warrant case at my side. That is the Warrant of Trade, I presume? May I? He extended a hand. It took effort not to tighten my grip protectively. An Inquisitor does outrank a rogue trader in authority. I handed it over. He cracked it open and briefly inspected the parchment within, likely checking for any subtle heretical alterations or damage. Satisfied, he closed it and returned it. As he did, he said quietly, "That piece of paper grants you wide latitude, rogue trader. But heed me, tread carefully in the days to come. A great many eyes are on you now, admirers, rivals, and worse. Some within the Imperium won't easily overlook a lost battleship and a consort with chaos, even if you were blameless." "I am aware of that," I replied, unable to keep a note of bitterness out of my voice. He actually smiled faintly. Good. Use that awareness. Redeem your losses with successes for the Imperium. That's the surest way to silence any whispers. With that almost fatherly advice, though he looked only a decade older than me, Cortez inclined his head and signaled the interview's end. "The Emperor protects, Lord Captain, and the throne's light guide you, Inquisitor." Walking out, I allowed myself a long exhale. That could have gone far worse. I wasn't clapped in irons or shot on suspicion, which is always a positive outcome with Inquisitors. By the time I returned to my ship, the Vengeance was bustling. The new crew hires were being integrated, supplies were coming aboard, and the tech adepts buzzed about installing fresh parts. We'd be space-worthy and ready to depart within a day. That night, or what passed for night under Footfall's artificial cycle, I sat alone in my quarters aboard Vengeance. Sleep eluded me. I poured a finger of amasec and sipped slowly, reflecting. The events replayed in my mind. Silas's sneer, the flash of his plasma pistol, the emptiness in my chest when I saw the warrant gone, the horror on his face when I bested him. The nightmares will no doubt follow for years. But also, I thought of the crew who remained, of Daniel's steady loyalty, Tomas's faith, Olicia's warnings. These people still believed in me, or at least in the idea of House Blackthorn. For their sake, I had to push forward. On a whim, I keyed open a small Vox recorder. Perhaps it was the amasec warming my blood, or just a need to hear my thoughts aloud. I began dictating a log entry, something I hadn't done in weeks, as routine logs had been the last thing on my mind. Captain's log, provisional entry. I, Cassius Blackthorn, record that on this day I find myself at a crossroads. The dynasty I inherited stands upon a knife's edge. We lost so much, a voidship that carried our hopes and history, thousands of souls I had sworn to protect, and nearly the very warrant that justifies our existence. What happens when a rogue trader loses his warrant? I have lived the answer. He loses more than a piece of paper. He loses the confidence of those around him, perhaps the confidence in himself. Doubt creeps in the crew's eyes, in each hesitant salute. Rivals smell blood in the void. Allies waver. The wolves gather. I've learned that the real worth of that warrant is not the parchment or the seals. It's the idea of trust. The Imperium's trust that we can handle the unhandleable, that we can walk the knife's edge at its fringes without falling. For a moment, I lost that trust, through no fault of my own, maybe, but lost all the same. Earning it back will be the fight of my life. I paused, swirling the amber liquid in my glass, then continued in a lower tone. I should be dead. By rights, I probably was meant to die with my ship, perhaps some emperor's test or punishment. But I didn't. Why? Emperor alone knows. Maybe to teach me humility, maybe to harden me for greater trials, or, as I sometimes darkly muse, just to toy with me a bit longer for his amusement. Yet here I stand. I have a ship, not the grand cruiser of before, but a ship nonetheless and a crew willing to follow. I have my warrant, a tad bloodied but unbowed, much like its bearer, and I have my duty, my pride, my spite, whatever mix of stubborn fuel keeps my heart beating and my mind plotting. I realized I was half talking to Silas's memory at that point, and to those shadowy forces that thought they could break me. A bit of dry venom slipped into my voice as I went on. They'll learn their error, those who thought Cassius Blackthorn would make an easy meal. I intend to show them that what doesn't kill this rogue trader, well, it just pisses him off. Still, I would be a fool to proceed as if nothing changed. Everything has changed. I can no longer play the magnanimous lord exploring for curios and profit at my leisure. One catastrophe lays that bare. I will have to be smarter, warier, trust fewer, question more. Perhaps that's another answer to what happens when you lose your warrant. You lose a certain comfortable naivete. You truly become rogue in mindset, if not in title. From here on, every deal, every voyage, every decision carries extra weight. The dynasty's survival hangs on me making the right calls. No warrant protections will save me if I slip. The Inquisition's interest confirmed that much. Is it terrifying? Absolutely. But throne help me, it's also invigorating in a strange way. The safety net's gone. It's all on me now. And if I succeed, it'll be by my own merits and the Emperor's grace, not just ancient privilege. I took the last sip of Amasek and set the glass down, concluding quietly, "Tomorrow we depart Footfall. Our course is uncertain. Perhaps back through the Maw to solicit aid from family allies in the Calixis sector. Perhaps chasing a few whispers of opportunity to rebuild wealth out here in the Expanse. Possibly pursuing vengeance against Vorlin Ormael and his ilk, if chance allows. Emperor knows I owe those filth for every drop of blood spilled. Whatever path I choose, one thing is certain, I carry on. By the Golden Throne, I carry on." I clicked off the recorder. A bit melodramatic, perhaps, but cathartic to say. I locked the log away with encryption. Maybe one day I'd let others read it, when this was long behind me. Before our departure, I assembled the surviving crew, along with the newly recruited hands, in the main hold of the Vengeance, its bulkheads scarred and oil-scented, but spacious enough for our purpose. It was a humble gathering compared to the thousands I once addressed on the Glory's parade deck, but every face in that hold looked to me with a mix of grief and hope. Some were bandaged, others exhausted, all standing at quiet attention amid crates and flickering lumen strips. I cleared my throat, the slight echo of it carrying through the hush. "Crew of the Vengeance," I began, voice amplifying via the Vox speakers, "and any souls now under my charge who once served aboard the Glory of Terra. I won't mince words. We have been through hell." I let that hang a moment, my gaze meeting theirs. We've lost comrades who were family to us. We've lost a ship that was our home and pride. A few heads bowed. I heard a muffled sob from somewhere in back. I pressed on, tone firm. "But we have not lost everything. We have not lost what makes us who we are. We carry on together." I held up the adamantine warrant case for all to see. "This," I said, "is just parchment and seal. Important, yes, the Emperor's decree that backs our endeavors. But the true strength of House Blackthorn isn't ink on paper. It's standing right in front of me. It's flesh and blood, courage, loyalty, and the Emperor's own fire in our hearts." I saw backs straighten, anger and determination flickering to life in tired eyes. "As long as one of you draws breath, our legacy lives. As long as I stand, we have a ship. We have a purpose. We will honor our fallen by refusing to give up." A low murmur of assent rippled through the crowd. I took a breath, steadying the emotion that threatened to choke me. Hard days lie ahead. We'll face them as we faced everything else, together or not at all. I'll be honest, we're running lighter than a pilgrim's prayer candle. One escort frigate, a few hundred souls. But trust me when I say I'd take a few determined souls over 1,000 faint hearts any day. A few cheers responded, tentative but growing. "So we'll rebuild. We'll get stronger. We'll adapt. That's what rogue traders do. That's what we do." I let a hint of wryness enter my voice. "The Void tried to kill us, and we're still here. Those who betrayed us think they've won, but they're ashes now. And any other foe out there watching, pirates, heretics, or otherwise, they'll learn that a Blackthorn is hardest to kill when he's been wounded." At that, the murmur became a solid cheer. These people needed to feel that spark. I felt it catching in me as well, a rekindling of resolve. I raised my hand for silence, concluding, We serve the Emperor at the edge of his realm. That hasn't changed, nor will it. We'll show the Imperium and ourselves what this crew is made of. All I ask is that you give your all, as you always have, and follow me into the stars once more. I managed a small, lopsided smile. Let's go make the void remember our name. A rousing shout went up. I saw men and women thump fists to breasts in salute, saw grim faces set in renewed purpose. They believed, or at least they wanted to. In that moment, so did I. With a final nod, I stepped down from the crate that had served as my podium, and the crew began to disperse to stations. The deed was done. We were united in common cause, however precarious our situation. In truth, my speech was as much for myself as for them. Judging by the steadier gait and determined looks as they filed out, it had its effect. We cast off lines and drifted from Footfall's embrace as the station's bell tolled gravely behind us. Some kind of ceremony at the Liege's palace. It felt like it was tolling for the dead, perhaps those lost recently, including mine. I stood on the bridge's command pulpit, warrant case clipped to my belt, and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there in the void's vast darkness lurked horrors and wonders beyond imagining. Once I had ventured forth with cocksure arrogance, thinking myself untouchable by those horrors because I flew under the Emperor's mandate. Now I knew better. I bore scars on my body and soul to prove it. But I also bore a flame inside, a flicker of purpose that refused to die, that even the void's coldest nights could not snuff out. "Navigator," I said calmly into the Vox, "lay in a course. Let's see what waits for us out there." "As you command, Lord Captain," Olisia's ethereal voice answered. The Vengeance's engines rumbled to life. I felt the subtle shift of momentum as we aimed toward the fringes, toward uncertainty, risk, and hope. Outside the bridge viewports, tendrils of unreal color swirled in the blackness as we pierced the veil. As the warp gate yawned and reality blurred, a final chill crept over my spirit. The Gellar Field thrummed, holding back the Empyrean's madness, but in that heartbeat between real space and warp, I thought I heard a familiar whisper, faint and hissing at the edges of hearing. "Cassius!" The voice was not Silas's, not exactly, but I knew the malevolence behind it. A lesser soul might have quailed. I confess, a quiver of dread fluttered in my gut. But I set my jaw and tightened my grip on the warrant's case and the hilt of my sheathed sword. "Not today," I murmured under my breath. Perhaps it was intended for whatever specter lurked beyond the veil, perhaps for my own trembling heart. "You've taken enough." On the console before me, an Aquila icon hung from a little chain. I clasped it briefly and whispered a line from the battle psalms. "Though my enemies surround me, I shall not fear, for the Emperor is with me." The whisper faded, a sibilant chuckle dissolving into the warp's hum. Whether it was real or my imagination, it didn't matter. I stood defiant in the face of the dark. "Engage warp engines," I commanded. With a flare of cobalt light, we hurtled forward, into the unknown, into destiny, unbound. My story wasn't over, not by a long shot. I settled back in the command throne as the warp currents enveloped us, a small, defiant smile tugging at my lips. Cassius Blackthorn was far from finished, beyond any doubt. The stars themselves would bear witness to our return. Our voyage had only just begun.